Please, I invite you all to the stage. Mr. Van Belkom. And Commissioner? Great. Yes, you can sit wherever you like. I'll sit here, though, if that's okay.
That's yours.
Yes, my seat here. Let me slap you. So I'm going to cut to the chase because I know we're getting short of time. So we're going to have a quick fire discussion about how blending can be used to partner with the private sector to achieve these sustainable and inclusive growth priorities in Africa. And we're going to begin by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us what you're going to bring to the discussion. And Commissioner, I would like to begin with you.
Well, my name is Andris Pielaks. I am Commissioner for Development, and one of my main functions is really to work with the grants, financing that member states channel through the European Union. Last year, we have been the second largest supplier of development aid worldwide after the United States. So it is quite a substantial amount of money, and always the question is how you make the biggest impact.
Okay, thank you very much. And Vice President of the IFC, please.
I'm Dimitris Tsiragos, IFC Vice President looking after Europe, so Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. I'm here to talk a little bit about how we look at blending, and also a little bit about how we look at Africa, which is for us one of the strategic priorities. And it's a place where we've been increasing our investments quite significantly in the last 10 years. And we look forward to doing so in the future.
Mr. Pim van Belkom.
Yes, I'm Pim van Belkom, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. As we all know, Africa faces a lot of challenges in infrastructure, in the weak banking system, and in a good investment environment. And the EIB brings long-term investment against competitive prices and a lot of expertise, and with the help of the blending mechanisms of the European Commission, I think we can make a success of this investment.
And Sigmar.
Yeah, my name is Sigi Pröbstl. I'm running the Africa business of Siemens. So for us, we are more than 150 years in Africa. So it already, what my colleague said, it makes a lot of sense to be there. For me, I see myself as an ambassador for Africa, to bring the business to Africa and to strengthen the relationships there.
So, Commissioner, can you tell us a little bit about blending? When does it come into the investment story?
Well, normally, traditionally, we worked very much with grants, and traditionally, development aid started as opposed to social systems. As the time evolved, we could have also put some money for investment. And then we have developed this EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund on investment facility, also for North Africa from neighborhood facility. And what we got with 2 billion investment, roughly we mobilized 40 billion euros on investment. It's mostly infrastructure investment. But definitely showed well that grant could play quite a crucial element for mobilizing financing. And as the time is going, it's less and less mistrust in private sector in general. The private sector, quite opposite, should be a partner, and we should evolve in partnership with private sector. And expectation is that this blending could go in areas where the financing is necessary, because part of the challenge of our partners, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises, is access to finance. And expectation is through blending, you could reach to the sectors, not only big infrastructure sectors, but actually sectors that you can create the jobs. And one of the sectors that we are particularly looking is everything related to agriculture and food processing. It could be elements that helps mitigate the risk of private sector or stimulate investment of development institutions like European Investment Bank or some others. So it's a basic idea how to use grants to increase finance available for investment in Africa.
So how does it mitigate the risk?
Well, first of all, to make investment, you need to make a study. In a lot of cases, there is not enough case for investment projects. So as a result, what you do, you finance studies necessary for investment. That is the simplest way. Second, sometimes interest rates that still involves in development banks, even favorable, are too high to be project viable. So you cut with financing interest rate, and etc. So you just need, we are rather flexible in vehicles, but we have quite a wide mandate as concerns really mobilizing investment. What we need definitely is that the whole system is transparent, because accountability towards the European Parliament does not decreases. And that means that whatever we do, we should be very precise why and how we work with. But since starting with working with European the investment banks, that is definitely has been and is our biggest partner, we have worked to platform where more development institutions work. And as it increases scale, I assume that there will be possibilities in next 7 years for other partnerships that could provide value for our African stakeholders. Because for me, the summits that is today and in business summits and then the heads of state summit, it's less about security because it goes reasonably well. It's actually about how to mobilize all necessary investment to continue the growth in Africa, to create jobs, but also create value for European investors. And we are very expecting that some African investments could come to Europe as well. So I assume that we need this opening up, and then the grant money could provide the necessary pillow in some more challenging cases where without grant financing, the process would be just too slow.
Dimitris, the IFC hasn't been really getting that involved in blending so far. Why is that? Are there risks that you're concerned about that haven't been dealt with yet?
I wouldn't say there are risks that we're concerned about. I think it's more part of our mandate. I think I like what I see up here, engaging the private sector in sustainable and inclusive growth. I think our mandate is to promote a sustainable private sector. So by definition, we want to support projects that are sustainable on their own and don't rely on grants, don't rely on other aid over time, but we see them as, because we think that this sets the example, and that is the key to success, and also the key to success in places like Africa, either in smaller and the bigger countries. When I look at what we've done, I said earlier, what we've done in Africa, I think since 2003, I think IFC's volume numbers have grown about 6-7 times. I think our numbers in Africa have grown almost 20 times. And our portfolio in Africa today is close to be about 20% of the total IFC portfolio. For us, Africa is a priority. We see many challenges in Africa, but we also see huge opportunities. I think I liked what I heard something earlier today. A lot of it is, a lot of people look at Africa as FDI, but I think we're also looking at developing the African entrepreneurs and supporting the African entrepreneurs. And there are many key areas for us, like infrastructure, like agribusiness, that we try to do more in. And I think these are the two sectors where we also see opportunities on blended finance. But we see as blended finance as an opportunity to kickstart projects and just get them through and take the most difficult ones and try to get them through and set them as the examples that others follow. It's not something that, we look at it as, and we also see blended finance as something that is time-bound. It's not an open-ended type of facility. And I think the other thing we see on blending, and Pim will talk about it, is an area where we also see the opportunity for partnerships. So we do a lot of blending with institutions like EIB, and we've done that one in Africa. I think our approach is disciplined, targeted, and is based on, I would say, the following principles. I think we need to move beyond the IFC additionality, where we see it as the subsidy is needed to complete a transaction, is needed to get it off the ground. We try to avoid market distortion on that one, and we want this subsidy to eventually, the blending, to lend to sustainability. That is the time-bound concept. And we also want to promote transparency. I think this is very important, and what we've done is we've worked with the other multilateral agencies to develop certain common principles on how we apply blended finance to the various projects that we finance.
Tell me about how you work on that transparency. What's
I think
the key issues?
it's important that what we've done internally is we've created, we have a general credit committee that approves projects, but we also have a subcommittee that looks at the various blended finance projects, projects that are put forward. And we want to make sure that all these projects meet our criteria. And at the end of the day, I think the important thing for us is we don't create a distortion. Because that, I think, is where you start distracting the market and, you create, in a way, some bad precedents. So the distortion element is key for our decision-making process.
Now, Dimitris introduced you and said you could tell us maybe a little bit more about the partnerships. Maybe you could talk about that if we talk through a particular project that the EIB has been involved with. Could you talk us through on that?
Yes, you can see a changing in the trend from development aid, which was mainly oriented to grant money, to involve the public and private investors into the scene, because without them, I think the challenges are too massive to face. One of the good examples, recent good examples, is our investment in the Turkana wind power project in Kenya. And this is, I think, the biggest private investment in Kenya. And as Andris Piebals already said, it was also based on a very successful EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, because it is, although it is a 200 million euro project, I think it was harder to achieve the completion of this project without the 25 million grant money invested via the European Union. And I think it's also quite important to stimulate countries to get more independent in terms of the energy base. And in that sense, I fully support Mr. Mawenga's remarks on the sustainability. That has to be broadened, otherwise ultimately you are not successful.
Siggy, so as Mr. Balcom has just mentioned, it's not just about finance. Here we're talking about environment. What else can the blending experience bring?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit of the word blending in a wider sense. Of course, blending in the financial sense is highly welcomed by the public and also by the private sector. Of course, we need this. While if it's a project, funding is the fundamental, it's the nucleus of everything. If the funding is right and if it's bankable, then the story is done already. So blending comes in when you have to push it somehow over the edge. If you need a feasibility study, if you need something like this, then the blending is on the public side, on the private side, highly welcome. But the word blending says it already. It's blending, it's bringing some things together. And bringing things together is very important for us in Africa. Education, it's mentioned a few times now. So bringing the public and the private together is of nucleus for us to get the engineers, to get the educated people out of our schools. And I'm very happy, I'm proud to announce that in South Africa we made something happen. The public and the private come together and set up a school, the Mandela High School in Mvezo. I think nobody knows where Mvezo is. It's in the rural area, in the ruralest of the rural area. It's the birthplace of Mandela. So we said, let's make a high school there, blending it together, public and private. And the question, what's in for us, was never asked. We just got together. And the payback times will be in times. It will be in years. But what I expect as for my companies, that educated engineers will make up the way. And I personally will look after that some of these people who go to the school will end up in my organization later on. So education blending there. But blending is also, and we mentioned it today, that private and public comes together in inter-Africa trade. We saw the figure, heard the figure today, 12% only. You can see it from the negative way. I see it from a positive way. 88% is still to do. It will never be possible, of course. But there is room for increasing. So we, on the South African side, we support Kenya now in our Intertrade African Siemens business. And the Kenyan Siemens organization supports Namibia or supports someone else. So we want to increase the blending amongst African countries. And I think this is high on our agenda.
So How can you evaluate the success of a project? Because it is very long term.
I think the success of a project is at the end, of course. But at the beginning, you have a feasibility study, you know what you want to achieve, and time is of essence. We are not different in Africa than anywhere else. You need a proper study, you need a proper business case, you have to execute, and then it happens. So what I don't like is that we talk a lot of Africa is different. Of course, we are somehow different in a pace, but in business terms, we are just as normal, as good as the rest of the world.
Commissioner, what role, and maybe this is a little more risky of a question, but what role do governments and political leaders have in the blending experience? What do you expect of them?
Well, for me, I think it's very important two things that governments need to continue to do. One is macroeconomic stability. If you visit Republic Democratic of Congo, well, there is an enormous need, but government keeps really budget tight, not being very conservative to keep stability, and I think political stability is the second. So macroeconomic, political stability, legal certainty. Just really try to think that things are stable. That, I think, is the most important point to the investors. Because what we need is that there is demand for money. That means that there are good ideas that ask for money. And we have now some vehicles in place, and we never quite evaluated what actually we have achieved. And I will just mention a couple of examples. If you go to Cape Verde, the biggest wind farm, to the capital, it's a blending project. Very small money actually comes from the grant. It was mostly European Investment Bank, but there was a grant element that made this possible. If you go to Letterie Bergère in Senegal, or to some renewable energy company that is in Mauritania, you will find at the beginning was small grant through the blending that allowed these enterprises to work to 3 or 4 years without any profit. So they could survive the time. So there's many forms, but I think from government side, for me would be important stability, because then investments will come, vehicles will work, and we will now preparing new communication on the support to private sector. We will try just to build on experiences we have, because the challenge is we have never scaled up some of it. And with new financial perspective, I believe we have this ability to scale up support to all type of blending projects.
And Mr. Pim van Gelcon, how do you incorporate job creation into these blending projects?
First of all, I fully agree with the words of Andries Piebalgs, because I think one of the main issues is to try to improve the investment climate and the political stability. And if that is, if the investment climate is good for us as a public institution, it is easier to motivate private investors to come to Africa. We are the biggest public financiers in the world. But we are a tiny little bank with 2,200 people working for it. And then we are always dependent on the commercial private sector in the country itself. So what we are doing is we are looking for commercial good counterparts in the country. They know their client base, and we operate via global loans or facilities in cooperation with the Commission or others. To reach out to the small and medium-sized enterprises and the microfinance institutions in the country to try to get the investments in that segment successful, because small and medium-sized enterprises and micro institutions are very important for battling the unemployment. And that is, I think, the challenges already mentioned, like infrastructure, energy, and the others. I think tackling the unemployment in the African continent is one of the biggest challenges, because that is also important for the stability in a country, and then you have the vicious circle, and the stability is important for the investment.
I saw you nodding, Dimitris. Would you like to add anything?
I think one topic that Pim touched on is, and I think was mentioned also earlier, is education. And I think that's a big challenge. And it's not only in Africa. I think it's a worldwide challenge in some respects. One has to look at it and see how do you improve the skill set to meet the needs of the private sector. Because in many ways, the private sector is prepared to go in many places, but they don't have the people with the right skill set that they can employ, and this is one of the deterrent for investments. So focusing on education, focusing in many ways on the soft skills, improving a skill set, and trying to find the partnership between, I would say, investors, governments, and also private educators, I think presents a tremendous opportunity, and I think that's something that we all have to look at collectively. And if I look at new sectors that say IFC can get involved in, education is one of these spaces. And I think I would say that probably the big challenges in Africa is, and this is one area that one can learn from Europe and certain countries in Europe, is the vocational training space, because that is a very important space, I think, for investors.
And Sigi, how can you make sure that profit doesn't override these development concerns?
I think it's on the private and public partnership. This should be not the major concern. The major concern is really that we work together, as a team, that we trust each other, that we find common grounds, that we find common nominators where we want to go together. And that also is the best way to make at the end profit for the organization. But every organization, every private organization meets some profit needs. There's no doubt about it. We are there to make profit at the end. But we also dare to develop. And trust each other is the biggest, I think, employment act, what you can do in that respect. I got one of my biggest, and coming back to blending, compliment I ever got in my life was when a black friend told me, "You're outside white, inside black," so I'm also a blend of Africa.
Now, I'd like to bring you all in. You haven't been involved in the discussions so far, so we'd like to take some questions from the floor. I'd ask you, please, to make them short and make them questions, not statements. So you have your hand up there. Yep. Do you have a microphone? It's just coming round, I can see.
That.
And please, yes, just tell us who you are.
Yes, my name is Alain Akwala. I'm Minister of Charge in Special Economic Zone in Congo-Brazzaville. I came from a country where French is spoken. My English not so very good. I don't know if I can ask my question in French.
Yep,
No.
I think I can try.
You say no.
translate it.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll try.
Of
Yes.
course you can.
Well, je viens donc du Congo, ministre en charge des zones économiques spéciales. Je suis très heureux d'être ici. Et j'ai suivi toutes les communications qui ont été faites jusqu'à présent. Ce n'est pas une question, c'est juste une contribution à la réflexion. Au niveau du Congo-Brazzaville, nous avons aujourd'hui décidé de diversifier l'économie de notre pays qui repose essentiellement sur le pétrole. Et nous voulons aujourd'hui créer une base industrielle pour créer, si j'ose dire, une économie réelle. Le pétrole est une très bonne chose qui ne fait pas du mal aux pays africains, contrairement à ce que l'on dit. Alors, au niveau donc, de mon ministère, nous avons réalisé des études de faisabilité en contractualisant une expertise mondialement reconnue.
And I have to ask you to keep it short.
Alors, au jour d'aujourd'hui, nous avons fini les études de faisabilité concernant les zones économiques spéciales au Congo. Nous savons aujourd'hui, pour le marché national, sous-régional et international, quelles sont les activités que nous pouvons développer, quelles sont les filières industrielles que nous pouvons développer, quels sont les investissements que nous devons faire en tant qu'État, et qu'est-ce que nous pouvons avoir comme impact en termes de création d'emplois et de croissance économique. Parce qu'il faut créer de la valeur ajoutée en Afrique et qu'on sorte de cette économie où nous prenons nos matières premières, nous les exportons. Donc nous sommes ici pour rencontrer justement les investisseurs et mettre à leur disposition ces études de faisabilité en les souhaitant bien entendu de venir investir dans notre pays. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So bringing an end to the extraction economy. Oh, well, yeah, there's a lady just next to you. Please could I ask for it to be a question, and please could you tell us which panelist you'd like to address it to?
Merci. I speak in French because I come from a country speaking French.
Okay.
Mon nom, c'est Madame Diaou Fatou Kiné. Je suis la présidente de l'Organisation des femmes d'affaires africaines. Je dirige également le comité sénégalais du Forum francophone des affaires. J'en profite pour inviter tous les participants au forum de l'investissement prévu en novembre au Sénégal en marge du sommet des chefs d'État
Do you have a
africains.
question, sir?
Yes, yes. Tous les panélistes ont dit qu'il faut améliorer l'éducation. Mais on sait que dans nos pays africains, l'éducation est surtout basée sur l'enseignement général, qui déverse des chômeurs dans le marché de l'emploi. Donc, il n'y a pas adéquation entre la formation et l'emploi, le marché de l'emploi. Donc, il faut développer l'esprit d'entreprise chez les jeunes. Vous dites que les jeunes, vous devez promouvoir l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes. Mais si à
What's your
l'école...
question, sir? What is your question?
J'ai dit que comment promouvoir l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes alors que au niveau de l'enseignement supérieur, l'esprit d'entreprise n'est pas développé.
So how,
Ensuite,
this is keep it to that. So how to promote the entrepreneurial spirit in schools? And I don't know who would like to answer that. Maybe Siggy, as you've been involved in the school experience.
But malheureusement, je ne parle pas français, je anglais. I think the best thing to engage people in schools is to get their interest going. And this is what we do in our school is we show them the variety, what's available on all the subjects. But they need a place to be. They need a purpose to be there. They have to know what they can learn. And at the end, they have to choose what is their favorite. So it's a dual way. It's a two-way. So we have to offer them, the people, something, and they have to come back to us. What do they want to learn?
furthermore, you tell us that we have to grow the agriculture. And the agriculture have not mean to develop our agriculture. They are only land. They are not finance. Donc we have to promote investment for agriculture. Women need equipment, agriculture equipment, hydraulic, and renewable energy.
No,
and we are
time,
looking for partner for...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you short. We have time for one more question. Sir, please make it a question and a short one. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je viens du Bénin. Je suis le président de la Chambre de commerce du Bénin, de l'industrie. Juste une petite question. Comment agir sur les taux élevés en Afrique? Vous ne pouvez pas financer l'agriculture avec des taux à 2 chiffres. Alors, comment nous allons agir pour justement booster l'agriculture, surtout cette agriculture qui nourrisse les Africains? Merci.
Very good and very precise question, yes.
That's also in connection to the questions earlier asked. The European Investment Bank is very, very much looking forward to invest in agriculture and to promote it. We do that via our SME credit lines and microfinance institutions where we invest in. But never forget that for agriculture and successful agriculture investments, you need reliable energy sources. You need good infrastructure because the products have to be transported and exported. So although agriculture is quite important for a country, it's very good for tackling unemployment, never forget that you have to have an enabling environment in order to be successful in the agriculture business. It is nowadays à la mode, so to say, to stress the importance. I fully agree, but never forget the surrounding investment climate. On the question of interest rates, the European Investment Bank, of course, has to make a certain profit, because we have to have our maintenance cost and we have to have a certain reserve to tackle defaults, but we are not a profit maximizing institution. So when we are coming in the market, the commercial sector on the ground is always asked to pass on the advantages of working with the European Investment Bank to the end user. So although the commercial sector needs a certain profit as well, ultimately the end users should profit of the investments of the European Investment Bank and not the commercial sector in between.
Commissioner.
Well, I think we have a limited experience. We only in Uganda we work really in with financial sector to decrease interest rates for farmers. I assume that the best way, if we can make both together, government and us, some bounty and ask banks what we would like to expect and ask their proposal, because we should not replace bank and should not necessarily create a new bank. But first ask existing banks, are they ready to finance agriculture when we take at least part of the interest rates? We make interest rate subsidy by some conditions. I think that at least would be the most, I think, the easiest way to go in this direction. I would mention just example, that's not exactly in agriculture, but my country, we have a subsidy for student loans. Basically, a part of the interest rates is done by government, and it functions quite well. Students get served. It's commercial banks that make some income, and bank is always ready to work with the client. So it's just need to get the interest. And interest is if bank could make money. So I think we could really propose to some bank for competitions that there will be bounty if they will serve agricultural sector by the conditions like these. And then let's see what is the response. I think that would be the easiest way forward.
Dimitri, so you have...
is the opportunities to, and the challenge is to create domestic liquidity and to create long-term liquidity for domestic banks, because this is how the costs in a way come down. And I think the focus should be on developing local capital markets. It's easier to do it in some of the larger countries, but I think there are also successful examples in smaller countries where there are some well-functioning financial capital markets. And I think that is one way of tackling the costs, in general, the interest costs. I think on agri-business, one big opportunity, I think, is the logistics part and the agri-infrastructure. I think that's where a lot of investments can take place, and that facilitates, the trade for a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs in this space.
I'm going to ask you all for a final thought, a very brief final thought, and let's go around this way, and I'll start with you, Commissioner.
No, for me, I think the big engagement is partnership, as it says for our engagement, engaging with the private sector for sustainable and inclusive growth. I think we should somehow change the paradigm, the governments for governing, private sector for making money. I think there is more complexity in this equation, and I think that we really need to develop this partnership.
Mr. Pim van Belkom.
Yes, next to me are two quite reliable institutions we work with quite frequently. But I would like to mention that to make investments in Africa successful, we're also dependent on the African Development Bank, on AFD, the French Development Corporation, of KfW, and a lot of others, because when we are working together, when we are trying ourselves to cut red tape, I think for us it's easier to motivate the private sector that Africa is a continent worth to invest in.
Dimitris Tsoukaras.
I would say that the one thought from me is blending is good, but at the end of the day, I think we have plenty of examples of successful African entrepreneurs, and there are more and more of that one. And I think that is the opportunity, and this is what we should be supporting. It's African entrepreneurship. I think that's what is going to drive, in many ways, the continent to the next level. I think the other point I was going to make is Africa has a tremendous opportunity, I think, because what we see and what we forget in Africa today is there is also a very strong middle class, an emerging middle class that creates a market opportunity, and this is something we need to support.
Yeah, for me, Africa is the place to be. This is what I say to everyone. It's a long-term strategy, and this is the difference which some companies still have, but what I sense from my colleagues also, long-term strategy is getting through. So I'm fully convinced on an African continent.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists, but also thank you very much to you for your involvement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I have your attention, please? We're going to go straight into plenary session 2, just to catch up on the time, and we'll finish at 1 o'clock promptly so that you can proceed to lunch. So I would kindly ask if you could all stay in the room, and we're going to start in 2 or 3 minutes' time with plenary session 2. Thank you very much. Could I also ask if Charles Mabira is here, if he could come forward to the podium, as well as Valentine Rugwabiza. Thank you.